The name on my phone screen hit me like a punch to the gut. Liam. 2 years. 2 goddamn years of silence. No calls, no messages, nothing. Every attempt I made to reach him was ignored. Letters returned, calls left ringing. He vanished. Cut me off like I never existed. And now, just like that, a message. I need you to transfer the family estate to my name. No, hey, Uncle Nick. No, sorry for disappearing. No explanation. Just a demand. I leaned back in my chair, my jaw tightening. So this was it. The only reason he ever reached out. I wasn't about to let it slide. Come by. We need to talk. Sent. The next day, he showed up at my door. Liam wasn't alone. A man in a stiff gray suit stood beside him, briefcase in hand. A lawyer. I opened the door and took them in. Liam didn't look anything like the kid I had raised after his parents, my brother and his wife, died in that crash. The boy who used to run around in ripped jeans and faded band tees was gone. This version of him, polished, designer clothes, perfect hair, an expression that screamed entitlement. I stepped aside. Come in. He didn't even glance at me. Just walked past like he owned the place. We sat in the living room. The lawyer set his briefcase on my coffee table, flipping it open with rehearsed precision. Mr. Weston, he began in that patronizing legal tone. As you are aware, your brother's estate was intended to pass to Mr. Liam Weston upon reaching legal adulthood. We'd like to finalize that transfer today. Liam still hadn't looked at me. I let out a slow breath, keeping my voice calm. That's not how this works. The lawyer barely reacted, just gave me a tight, insincere smile. Actually, it is. The estate was meant to go to Liam, but due to certain legal complications at the time of your brother's passing, it was placed under your name temporarily. Now that Liam is of age, we'd like to move forward. I finally looked at my nephew. I asked, raising an eyebrow. He exhaled sharply. Like he was irritated I even asked. My fiancée and I. That was new. I nodded, acting like I was considering it. Then I got up, walked to my desk, pulled out a thick folder, and placed it in front of them. Before we do anything, you should probably read this. Liam rolled his eyes but grabbed the documents. The lawyer leaned in to read along. I watched their faces. First, mild confusion. Then uncertainty. Then the hit. Liam's cocky posture stiffened. His eyebrows pulled together. The lawyer's lips pressed into a thin line. And just like that, the entire game shifted. What is this? Liam snapped. I leaned back against the couch, crossing my arms. That, Liam, is the updated will your father had drawn up 2 months before he died. He blinked. That's not possible. Oh, but it is. I tapped the paper. Your dad and I had a long talk when you were 16. He had concerns. His lips parted slightly. The lawyer spoke instead. This will invalidate the previous terms. His voice was quieter now, less confident. Correct. I nodded. It states that the estate is to remain in my name indefinitely. It was amended to include a clause, one that requires you to meet specific conditions before any transfer can even be considered. Liam's hand clenched around the papers. That's not fair. I shrugged. It's legal. The lawyer closed his briefcase with a sharp snap. Mr. Weston, we will be contesting this in court. I smiled. Go ahead. Liam's jaw tightened. You had no right. I had every right. I cut in. And you know it. He exhaled sharply, slamming the papers onto the table. This isn't over. I tilted my head. Oh, I know. But just as they turned to leave, I added, before you go, you should read the last page. Liam hesitated, then yanked the papers back and flipped to the final document. His eyes scanned the words once, twice, then his breath hitched. I watched his fingers tighten around the paper, his entire body going rigid. The lawyer leaned over his shoulder, reading it too. His reaction was more controlled, but the way his jaw tensed told me everything. Liam swallowed hard. What is this? He whispered. The lawyer reached for it, but Liam clutched it to his chest like it might disappear if he let go. I didn't rush him. I let it sink in. Let him absorb what it meant. Because that page, that was the final nail in the coffin. And the best part, he had no one to blame but himself. Liam stood there, gripping the papers so hard his knuckles went white. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably beside him, but I kept my expression neutral. I wanted to see how long it would take before my nephew broke the silence. He didn't disappoint. What the hell is this supposed to mean? His voice wavered, the sharp confidence from earlier cracking. I let out a slow breath, keeping my eyes locked on his. It means exactly what it says, kid. The estate isn't yours. It was never going to be yours, not unless you met the conditions your father set. His jaw clenched. Conditions? What conditions? I crossed my arms. It's all in the documents. Maybe if you'd been around these last 2 years, you'd already know. That hit home. Liam's eyes flickered with something, guilt maybe, but it was gone in an instant, swallowed by anger. His lawyer, clearing his throat, leaned forward. Mr. Weston, I must insist we be given a full copy of these documents for review. I smirked. Be my guest. But it won't change a damn thing. Liam shot me a glare. This is bullshit. My father wouldn't do this. I arched a brow. You sure about that? Because he did. And deep down, I think you already know why. He swallowed hard. I could see it in his eyes, the battle raging in his head. He wanted to believe I was lying, but he couldn't shake the possibility that I wasn't. Finally, he tore his gaze away and shoved the documents back into his lawyer's hands. We'll be in touch. Looking forward to it, I said, voice flat. I watched them go, the front door slamming behind them, and as I stood there in the quiet house, I exhaled, rubbing my temples. This was just the beginning. I expected a fight, but I didn't expect how fast Liam was willing to play dirty. The first strike came a week later, a formal letter from his lawyer, full of legal jargon meant to intimidate me. They wanted the estate transferred immediately, claiming the revised will was invalid due to undue influence. I ignored it. Then came the calls. First from the lawyer, then from Liam, then from unknown numbers. His fiancée, maybe? I blocked them all. Then the real attack came. One morning, I woke up and found the front door of the estate wide open. At first, I thought I had forgotten to lock it, but as I stepped inside, something felt wrong. I moved carefully, my stomach twisting. Then I saw it. The office had been ransacked. Papers everywhere. Drawers pulled out. My desk overturned. And the filing cabinet, the one that held all the original documents, pried open. A slow, cold rage settled in my chest. I called the police, reported the break-in, but I already knew how this would play out. No cameras, no direct evidence. They'd take some notes, ask me a few questions, and that would be it. But what Liam didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I never kept the originals in that cabinet. The real copies? They were locked away in a safe deposit box at the bank. What they had stolen were just copies. Liam wanted to play dirty? Fine. I'd play dirtier. I didn't go to the police with accusations. That would have been stupid, no proof, no case. But I had another move. The next day, I walked into the office of Harold Pierce, the estate's longtime lawyer, the man who had handled my brother's affairs before he passed. He was old, sharp, and not easily intimidated. Harold, I said, dropping into the chair across from his desk. We need to make some changes. He leaned back, eyeing me carefully. Liam? I nodded. Harold sighed, rubbing his temples. I told your brother this would happen. We spent the next 2 hours going through every loophole, every safeguard, every option. By the time I left his office, I had one thing in my pocket that Liam wasn't expecting, a restraining order. If he wanted to fight me for this estate, he was going to have to do it from a distance. I thought that would be enough to keep him away. I was wrong. 3 days later, I got a call from Harold. His voice was tight. He just filed a lawsuit. I almost laughed. On what grounds? Fraud. He sighed. He's claiming the will was forged. For a second, I didn't say anything. Then I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temple. Tell me you're kidding. I wish I was. A forged will. That was serious. If he somehow managed to convince a judge to even consider it, I could lose everything. But here's the thing. Liam had no idea what he was up against, because I knew this was coming. And I had one last document he didn't know existed, a document that proved just how deep his betrayal went. And when I handed it to the court, it would destroy him. Liam thought he had me cornered, that filing a lawsuit would shake me, that throwing around words like fraud and forgery would put me on the defensive. What he didn't realize, I had been preparing for this moment since the day he walked away. I wasn't going to wait for Liam's next move. If he wanted to accuse me of forgery, I was going to make sure he regretted it. So I made a call. The man who picked up was Douglas Grayson, the attorney who had helped my brother draft his final will. He was retired now, but I knew he'd remember one crucial detail. The signing of the will had been recorded. My brother was a careful man. After watching our own parents' estate get ripped apart by legal battles, he swore he'd never leave anything up for interpretation. So when he updated his will, he had Douglas arrange for the signing to be videotaped, in front of 2 neutral witnesses. I had seen the tape once before. It was short, direct. My brother sat in his hospital bed, weak but lucid, staring straight into the camera. I am of sound mind. This is my will. No one is forcing me to change it. Then the signatures, the notarization, the camera panning to the 2 witnesses as they confirmed what had just happened. Liam had no idea that proof existed, and now I was going to use it. Liam's lawsuit moved fast. Within weeks, we were standing in front of a judge. I sat at my table, Harold beside me. Across from us, Liam and his lawyer. Liam looked calm, but I saw the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers curled into fists beneath the table. The judge looked at Liam's lawyer. "Present your case." The lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we believe Mr. Nicholas Weston manipulated the deceased into changing his will under duress. We have reason to believe the document was either altered or entirely forged." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Weston, do you have evidence to the contrary?" I stood, adjusting my tie. "Yes, Your Honor. In fact, I have something that will settle this matter entirely." I gestured to Harold, who handed over a flash drive to the bailiff. "If you would, Your Honor, please watch the file labeled Final Will Recording." Liam stiffened. His lawyer shot him a questioning glance, but Liam kept his gaze forward, jaw locked. The courtroom fell silent as the video played. My brother's voice filled the room, tired but clear. "I am of sound mind. This is my will. No one is forcing me to change it." The signatures, the notarization, the camera panning to the witnesses. When the screen went black, I turned my head and watched Liam's world crumble. His lawyer looked like he had just swallowed a lemon. The judge turned back to Liam. "Mr. Weston, do you still wish to proceed with your claim of forgery?" Liam opened his mouth, then closed it. His face was pale as a sheet. His lawyer leaned in and whispered something, probably telling him to drop it before he made things worse. But Liam? He wasn't done. He shot up from his seat. "I was lied to." The courtroom murmured. The judge raised an eyebrow. "By whom?" Liam clenched his fists. "By him." He pointed straight at me. I sighed. "Liam, the video." "I don't care about the video." He cut me off, voice shaking. His lawyer tried to pull him back into his seat, but Liam yanked his arm away. He always controlled everything. My father trusted him too much. Enough. The judge's voice was sharp, final. "Sit down, Mr. Weston. Now." Liam froze. For the first time, real fear crossed his face. Slowly, he sank back into his chair. The judge exhaled, clearly irritated. "Miss Jenkins." He turned to Liam's lawyer. "I strongly suggest you advise your client before he says anything else that could harm his case." The lawyer nodded stiffly, her lips pressed into a thin line. But it didn't matter. Liam had already lost. The case should have ended right there. But Liam wasn't just after the estate anymore. He was after revenge. The next morning, my phone blew up with notifications. Liam had gone public. He posted a long, emotional rant on social media, painting me as the villain. He claimed I had stolen his inheritance, that I had trapped him in poverty while I lived in luxury off what was rightfully his, that I had manipulated my brother into changing the will. And worst of all, people believed him. His post went viral. Thousands of comments, shares, messages, strangers calling me a monster. I even got threats. Liam wanted to destroy me. But what he didn't realize, he had just handed me the perfect opportunity to destroy him. Liam's sob story left out one crucial detail. He wasn't broke. In fact, he was living in a multi-million-dollar penthouse in Miami, one that had been purchased 6 months earlier in his fiancée's name. Where did they get the money? Simple. Liam had already drained his parents' other bank accounts. The estate wasn't the only thing my brother left behind. There were additional savings accounts, investments, and even a trust fund, one that Liam wasn't supposed to access until he turned 30. But he had found a way to get to it early, and I had proof. Bank transfers, records of withdrawals, a document with his fiance's signature, proving they moved the money into a shared offshore account. Liam wasn't broke. He was a liar, and now I had the receipts. I let Liam enjoy his moment in the spotlight, let him bask in the sympathy. Then I dropped everything. Screenshots of bank transactions, proof of the trust fund withdrawals, even a photo of him standing on the balcony of his Miami penthouse, wine glass in hand, taken from his own fiance's social media. The internet turned fast. People who defended him deleted their comments. Others started calling him the thief. Memes popped up overnight. But the worst part for Liam? The bank saw the leaks too. And that's when they got involved. The trust fund had strict legal protections. Accessing it early was fraud. And now, Liam wasn't just losing public sympathy. He was about to face real legal trouble. Liam had always been reckless. But this time, he had made a fatal mistake, one he couldn't talk his way out of. The moment the bank got involved, everything changed. It started with a freeze on his accounts. Every dollar he had funneled into that offshore account, locked down. His Miami penthouse, seized. His investments, gone. Then came the legal notices. The trust fund had strict conditions he had blatantly violated. The financial institution overseeing it didn't care about his sob story, didn't care about his excuses. As far as they were concerned, he had committed fraud, and fraud had consequences. Liam had gone from playing the victim online to fighting to stay out of prison. His lawyer, so smug when this all began, dropped him as a client. She wasn't about to be dragged into a case she knew she couldn't win. His fiancée vanished, scrubbed her social media, blocked his number, disappeared like she had never existed. And just like that, Liam was alone. That's when he showed up at my door. I had seen him desperate before, but not like this. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, unkempt, a sharp contrast to the polished arrogance he carried when he first walked into my house, demanding the estate. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, dark circles making him look years older. For the first time in a long time, he looked like the boy I used to know. But that boy had made his choices, and now he was here to face them. The knock was frantic, desperate. I didn't answer right away. Let him stand out there in the cold. Let the weight of everything he had done sink in. When I finally opened the door, I didn't step aside to let him in. I just stared. Liam didn't say anything at first. His mouth opened, then closed. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. And then, finally, the words came. He blamed me. For everything. For the lawsuit. For the money. For the trust fund. For the fact that the world had turned on him. For the fact that he was now penniless, ruined, alone. He spoke like I had been the one to abandon him. Like I had been the one who cut him off. Ignored every call. Vanished for 2 years only to resurface when I needed something. He spoke like he hadn't just spent the last few months trying to rip my life apart. I didn't yell. Didn't argue. I just let him talk. And when he was done, when he was finally out of excuses, I told him the truth. That this was his own doing. That he had walked away first. That he had thrown me aside the second he thought he didn't need me. That he had chosen money, greed, and manipulation over family. And now he had to live with the consequences. Liam had never been good at taking responsibility. But for the first time, I saw it in his face. He knew I was right. That realization broke him. His breath hitched. His hands curled into fists. His whole body trembled like he wanted to say something, to argue, to fight. But there was nothing left to fight for. And he knew it. When he finally spoke again, his voice was different, softer. A plea. A whisper of the boy I once raised, the nephew I once knew. He said he had nothing left. That I was all he had. I swallowed hard. Because for a second, just a second, I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was real. But love isn't enough. Not when it comes at the cost of self-destruction. I told him to leave. Not in anger. Not in spite. Just a quiet, simple truth. I can't fix this for you. And I won't. For the first time, Liam understood that he had finally pushed too far, that there was no coming back from this. His shoulders slumped. His eyes dropped to the floor. And then, without another word, he turned and walked away. I watched him go. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Liam didn't go to jail. The bank didn't want a long, messy trial, so they offered him a deal. Pay it all back, every cent. That meant selling everything. His car, his watches, the Miami penthouse. Everything he had built his new life on was gone. And once it was all over, when there was nothing left to take, he tried reaching out. This time, the messages were different. No demands, no anger, just silence, then regret. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Can we talk? I never responded. Maybe one day, when he truly understood what he had done, when he had actually changed. Maybe then, but not today. Silence. That was all that remained. No more lawyers. No more threats. No more desperate pleas at my doorstep. Liam was gone. And for the first time in years, my life was quiet again. But quiet doesn't always mean peace. I thought I'd feel relief when it was over, when the estate was secure, when Liam had no more moves left to play. And for a while I did. But in the weeks that followed, something settled in my chest. Not regret. I didn't regret what I did. I regretted that it ever had to happen. Because Liam wasn't just some distant relative. He wasn't just a name in a lawsuit. I had raised him. I had loved him. And now, I wasn't sure if I'd ever see him again. That was the part that hurt the most. The messages kept coming. They weren't frequent. Maybe once every few weeks. A simple, "Hey," or "Can we talk?" I never answered, because I knew what he was really asking. He wasn't asking to talk. He was asking for forgiveness. But forgiveness isn't just about words. It's about change. And Liam, he wasn't there yet. Months passed. The world moved on. The estate remained mine, untouched, just as my brother had wanted. The scandal surrounding Liam faded, replaced by new stories, new people, new drama. But I still thought about him, wondered where he had gone, if he had learned anything from this, if he even could change. Because the truth is, not everyone does. Some people hit rock bottom and claw their way back up. Others, they just keep falling. And I didn't know which one Liam was yet. One night, much later than I'd like to admit, I found myself doing something I swore I wouldn't. I looked him up. His social media was quiet. No updates. No posts. No flashy pictures of a life he wanted people to envy. Just emptiness. That should have been a good thing. Maybe it meant he was finally off that path. Maybe it meant he was figuring things out. But deep down, I knew better. Liam wasn't the kind of person who could handle being alone. And that's when the guilt started to creep in. Did I do the right thing? Did I push him too far? Did I leave him with nothing when I should have left him with something? I shook the thoughts away. No. Liam had made his choices, and he had to live with them, just like I had to live with mine. The last message he ever sent me came nearly a year after it all ended. It wasn't long. It wasn't angry. It just said, "I get it now." I read it twice. 3 times. My fingers hovered over the screen, over the reply button. But in the end, I just let it sit there, unread, because understanding something and changing because of it are two very different things. Time has a way of dulling even the sharpest wounds. What once consumed me, the anger, the betrayal, the bitterness, became something quieter. Not forgotten, not forgiven, but no longer something that controlled me. Liam was gone. Not in the literal sense. I knew he was still out there, somewhere. But in every way that mattered. He was no longer my responsibility. No longer my burden to carry. And I had finally made peace with that. Seasons changed, and life moved forward. The estate remained mine, just as my brother intended. I made renovations, cleared out the spaces that had sat untouched for years. It was no longer a place frozen in time, waiting for something that would never come. It was mine now, not as a relic of the past, but as a home for the future. Liam's absence became something I no longer noticed. The messages stopped. The world no longer whispered about him. His name was just another memory, one of many that I had collected over a lifetime. And maybe that was for the best. One day, long after I had stopped expecting it, I saw him. It wasn't planned. There were no lawyers, no demands, no bitterness in his posture. Just a man I barely recognized, sitting on a bench in a city far from where we had last seen each other. He looked different. Not just older, but lighter, like the weight of everything had finally started to lift. There was no flash of anger in his eyes, no entitled edge to his expression, just quiet acknowledgement, the kind that comes with understanding things too late. I could have approached him, could have asked where he had been, what he had done with himself, if he had finally learned what it meant to stand on his own. But I didn't. I simply watched for a moment longer, then walked away. Because some things don't need to be reopened. Some chapters are better left closed. And this was the ending I chose.